for his love never ends. And all the people said amen. And all the people said amen.
Just listen to the music, sing along, of course, but really just let it soak into you, bring you to a place where your heart is open, where you're going to be able to receive messages from whatever I say, from whatever you say to each other later, and really just be more contemplative today, and we'll take it slow and we'll take it quiet.
We are one in the Spirit. We are one with the Lord. We are one in the Spirit. We are one with the Lord. And we pray that all unity will one day be restored. And they'll know we are Christians by our love, by our love. Yes, they'll know we are Christians by our love. We will walk with each other. We will walk hand in hand. We will walk with each other. We will walk hand in hand.
We're starting a new series today, and I'm really excited about it. It's going to be awesome. And it's going to be a long series, potentially. It's huge. It's going to be big, because its scope is pretty large. We're going to be working through the whole Bible, the whole entire Bible. Are you ready for that? What? Now, before you start to get worried, because if I was sitting out there and someone was up here and they said, our new series is going to be the entire Bible, I'd be like, peace. Count me out. Right? Because the Bible's huge. It's enormous. You know why Bibles have those thin, like, butterfly wing pages, right? Because if you put regular, like, normal book pages, it'd be, like, humongous. I mean, look at this. Look at this. I got my props. This isn't such a bad book to carry around, right? It kind of fits in a bag. But you can literally, like, see through the pages. And if you try to read it, the font is, like, extremely tiny. Like, I can read it, but I know I won't be able to, like, in 10 years or something. This one's not so bad. Like, the pages are normal. They're a little thicker. The font's okay. But it's only the New Testament. Look at this bad boy. Look at this. You going to carry this around? You going to leave it in the... Yeah. Preach it. Look at this. It's humongous. This book right here that I'm holding is 1,400 pages. And this is not a study Bible. There's no notes in this. It's just the text, right? That's it. You want to make it somewhat readable? Even this has the skinny pages, though. It's huge. It's an enormous book, and it's complex because of that. But there's so much going on in this humongously large book. And so many exciting, awesome things. And the interesting thing about this book is that it's always able somehow to speak to people in all these different time periods, all these different ages, all these different societies, different contexts, different cultures. There's something going on in it that compels us. There's something in this collection of stories and histories and letters and laws and poems and songs that resonates with us again and again, somehow. And if you don't find it compelling, then hopefully you will after this. And if you do find it compelling, hopefully it'll take a new dimension for you. And you'll find it compelling and life-giving in new ways that maybe you didn't see it before. Why is it able to do that? Why is this book able to speak to people in compelling ways? Why is it able to awaken things inside of us that sometimes we didn't even know were there? The short answer to that question is that it tells a story. And that story that it tells is about hope and renewal and love and putting together broken pieces and restoration and life. And it's a story for and about all of us. It's a story about humanity. It's not just our story that, isn't for them, like whoever you want to put in those boxes. It's a story for everybody and about everybody. Unfortunately, sometimes the loudest voices that surround this book don't really tell the story that way. And that's unfortunate because you miss so much. So, what I want to do in this series is reclaim some of that beauty and reclaim some of that grandeur and reclaim the Bible itself. It's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting. So today's an introduction to this series. Right? We're going to get a little bit into what that story is, but we're going to set the groundwork for how this is going to work, how this is going to move, and how we can think about digging and diving into this story. We're going to talk about today how to view the Bible and how not to view it in order to best hear what's going on in it. In order to hear the message it has for us, we have to know how to listen, right? That makes sense. So, I said a second ago that the Bible is a story of hope and love and peace and renewal and restoration. Here's how I know this. I cheated, and I went to the end of the story, right? Do you ever do that? I like to do that. I I like sometimes to have spoilers. My brother's shaking his head no. I do sometimes. In fact, 2 days ago, Friday, I walk in the house, and Braylon says to me, Daddy, we got you a Father's Day gift. And did I do the right thing? No, I did the wrong thing. I said, what is it, buddy? Just immediately, like, what? Tell me. And then Britt's like, no, don't tell him. And he's sitting there thinking about it. And he's like, do I do what Daddy says? Do I do what Mommy says? Mommy's my favorite. Mommy's my favorite. He makes that very clear on a daily basis. And he's thinking, and then he gets this idea, you can see it in his eyes, like, Daddy, we got you a surprise shirt. And I'm like, oh, okay, nice. So as long as he puts surprise in front of it, right, he can tell me what it is. Technically, I don't know what kind of shirt. It could be blue, it could be green. It's probably blue or gray, though. I hope. But I won't try to cover that up. When Britt tells me she's like, oh, I got you a birthday present today, and it's like in March and my birthday's in April, I'm like, what is it? Tell me now. Can I have it early? Just give it to me early. I don't need to wait till my birthday. I just want it. I like to know it. When my sons watch cartoons, I want to see the end of the story. Even if they leave the room and they're done watching Peppa Pig or Paw Patrol or whatever, I'll sit down and finish it because I want to know how the story ends. They've been watching Scooby-Doo recently, and I don't know if you remember Scooby-Doo, but every single episode is the same plot. It's the same thing every time. And yet I'm like, yeah, but is it Mr. Casey? I got to see the mask come off. I got to hear the man say, and it would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for those pesky kids and that dog. Every time, I got to hear the end of the story. I'm reading this awesome book right now by one of my favorite authors, and one of the main characters said something in it that was so compelling, so intriguing. I literally flipped to the back. I'm like, no. I was good. I didn't spoil that book, but I wanted to so badly. But today I am. I'm going to spoil it. So, spoiler alert. If you don't know the end of the overall story, then cover your ears or leave or something, But I think most of you probably heard it before. So it comes from the book of Revelation. Revelation chapter 21 is where we're going to start today. And we see these words, potentially. I'm working on the slide thing. Remember I said I was going to do it again? I have it on my phone. Yes! My laptop was stolen, so I'm going to get a new one this week, and then I'll be able to do it more effectively than on my phone. But we see these words. He will wipe... No. Okay, then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe every tear from their eye. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. He who was seated on the throne said, I'm making everything new. And he said, write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. He said to me, it's done. I am Alpha. I am Omega, beginning, end. To the thirsty I will give water without cost from the spring of the water of life. This is the end of this book. Right? It comes at the end, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything, right? You put things that kind of make the most sense. But the reason we think about it as the end is just because of the sense of finality that the text gives us, right? We see God saying, it's done. I'm done. Finished. Well, what's the end look like? It's a pretty nice ending. Look at this. I printed off my sermon. They're all blank. Let's see if I can do this from memory, people. What does the end look like, right? So we have the book of Revelation. And Revelation is the last book of the Bible. It's a book of things revealed, in case you didn't pick that up from the title. And what's revealed is a bunch of crazy stuff that John says is about to happen, is here, It's happening now, different things, the different ways he says it. But basically, it's a book of events going around in the life of John, the early church, and it's written in this prophetic style using apocalyptic imagery. So there's sea monsters and dragons and wars and plagues and all that. We're not dealing with all that today. Today, we're just looking at the end. And we see that after all that stuff happens, after like scrolls are eaten and dragons are killed and like all this stuff, the very last thing that happens is that a city descends. A city comes down to earth. And God says, I'm with everybody now. My dwelling place is among human beings. There's no more pain. There's no more suffering. There's no more sea. What do you mean there's no more sea? Why would this new good earth have no sea? Like, did God have something against fishing? Does he not like whales? No, sea is just that chaos, that destruction, that imagery of violence and death and everything bad, right? The place where all the bad things live, the sea monster like last week we saw, swallow Jonah. Those things are gone. Remember that when God created the world in Genesis, he said, it's good, but remember, he also said, Cain, sin's crouching at the door, right? Ready to get you if you let it. Even that good world had this element of chaos that hadn't yet been conquered. But in this new earth, it's been conquered. There's no death. There's no chaos. There's no sorrow. There's no pain. There's no suffering. A beautiful ending. Now, how do we get to there from all the rest of this? And how do all the stories and histories and poems and all of the various writings in here get us to that point where we can say, it's done, we're done. Everything's good, everyone's okay. There's no one crying, there's no one hurting. How can that happen? And how do these stories help us to understand that ending? First of all, I want you to know that everything really does get us to that point, right? And I also want you to hold on to that hope of that final story. That's what the Bible's about. If you think it's about something else, then you're going to get confused about what so many of these stories mean, because there's a lot of weird stuff in the Bible, and we'll talk about some of it. But the main point, the whole thrust, the whole narrative arc of the entire thing is that we're heading to a place where everyone is all right. Everyone's okay. We will eradicate the pain, suffering, sorrow, and death. If you look in the book of Revelation, a chapter before that, it says that death itself and Hades, the holding place for the dead people, is literally burned up. Like, even death and the place that you can... What is this, sir? Oh, yes, okay, thank you. These are both... Death itself is just destroyed. Anything evil, bad, painful to humanity is shown to be just destroyed, gone, burned up. And what we're left with is this beautiful, beautiful place where God and humanity are intertwined together. He will be their God and they will be his people. And he won't sit on high, right? Isn't that different from what you hear in some of the other parts of the Bible? The city of Zion, set on the hill. Nobody can know the inscrutable ways of God, like all these things from the prophets. But then in this world we see that city, that holy city comes down and he's with people. There's no high distinction anymore. So that's the story. That's the overall ending to the story that we have to hold in our hearts and hold in our heads as we dive into the rest of it. It ends with hope. It ends with peace. It ends with God being all in all. So now an intro into the Bible itself. Because if we're going to look at all of these pages, right, like all of these, and march our way through this for as long as it takes. And by the way, we're not going like word by word by word. Don't worry. Like, we're not going to spend like 10 weeks in Leviticus or anything like that. What this is going to be is we're going to move through a lot of the book stuff, and probably at least one sermon from every book.
to highlight how these stories are getting us to the point where humanity and the earth will look like that Revelation scene. And ways that even when the earth isn't what it's supposed to be and people aren't living the way they're supposed to live, there's something in these texts that are pulling humanity forward and pulling them into that future hope of Revelation. So, if we're going to look at all of this and figure out how it all points us to the text we read, then we have to understand how to view these books. And we have to understand that it takes a lot of work to read them, like a lot of work. Because this is not just one book that somebody sat down and wrote at one time. Think about like the fact that you can go take a college course on Tolstoy, right? This Russian novelist who wrote these big books. You can take a college course, like you can spend 2-3 semesters even. You can get your PhD in less complex books than the Bible. And that's just someone who like sat down and wrote it over like a 2-3 year span. Think about the fact that the Bible was written over a span of like 1,500 years by 20, 30 different authors and edited and compiled by scores of people beyond that and written in different languages that are both now dead and aren't even used today. Think about that and realize that it's really, really complex. We can tend to maybe get complacent with the Bible because we've used it our whole lives if we're raised in church. Or, I went to Lifeway the other day because I was looking for a commentary. And you walk in and it's like all these different Bibles and for all these different like occasions, like gift award Bibles, and they market that towards graduation because it's like graduation time right now. And it's like Bible for kids, Bible for teens, and they have cool pictures on the front, and they're, just decorated differently. And then there's all the different translations as well, and you have like 4 or 5 aisles of just Bibles, and then study Bibles, archaeological study Bible, men's study Bible, women's study Bible. And it's like, man, you just kind of view it as a commodity, right? You just view it as like another item in any store. But it's weird to think that in this store where you've got all these books written by just people who are still alive today, there's also these aisles of books that are like just compiled from little scraps that people have pulled out of the desert and translated by men over like hundreds and thousands of years. And it's just very interesting. We have to, I think, not be so familiar with it that we lose its ability to speak to us in new and fresh ways. I want you to think about something here. I want you to just really put yourself into the life cycle of the Bible. I want us to travel back in time 3,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago, when tribes are sitting around fires and talking to each other, telling stories about their God, telling stories about their past. And generation after generation after generation, they tell these stories. And then one day, someone decides to write it down. And so they start compiling this, right? And they pass these writings on to scribes who copy them down, compile them, keep them in safe places, and the book begins to grow. And the book begins to grow. And a prophet will come and speak. And someone writes it down. And another prophet writes down his message. And it continues to grow. And then I want you to think that in the life of Jesus, Jesus comes and he takes that book that everyone had compiled and he starts teaching it in new, interesting ways. And people are like blown away by it. And so they start writing letters to each other about what Jesus said. And these letters are so powerful that they're starting to speak to people's lives. So people are keeping these letters in safe places. And the book begins to grow. But then I want you to remember this is 2,000 years ago. And there have been floods and fires and wars and plagues and more wars and more fires and more floods. And those letters that people kept are destroyed. And so archaeologists find new pieces, new scraps. We take books that scribes had written. We compile it all together, and that's how we find the Bible. It's a really awesome, cool process, but it's not easy, and it's not simple. I have my Greek New Testament here. And the way this is set up is like you have the body, right? It has like the scripture. And underneath it you have this called the apparatus. And in the body, everything in here is what has been determined by the United Bible Society. This is the fourth time they decided it. Is the most likely to be closest to the very original thing that an author would write. But underneath, you have all the variants, right? So like you have a group of family of text that says it this way, and then a group of family of text says it this way, and like a variant might be the word is spelled differently, or it might be the sentence is different. It could be a big difference, it could be a small difference. What I want to point out to you today is that, look at this, every single page of this thing has footnotes of different textual variants. Every single page. And sometimes it's like bigger than the text itself, right? Like there's only one right here. But like this one's like half the page. All these differences. Why? Well, of course. Of course, when you're like finding, oh, here's a piece of John chapter 3. Sweet. Let's compare it to the other ones and see if it's, different or earlier or later or whatever. Like that's just what they do. Thank God for archaeologists who, like, every day, we live in an awesome time, by the way. Archaeologists every day are finding more and more about the Bible and teaching us more and more about the time it was written so that we can better understand it. It's really awesome. But just keep it in mind that let's not, like, be flippant with, like, how we understand it. Because it's difficult. We have to put ourselves back in that time period. It's not easy. Too often we bring our own baggage from our own religious backgrounds, or our own societal backgrounds, our own racial backgrounds, our own gender backgrounds, like all this baggage we have, we bring it to the text. And there's nothing wrong with baggage. Everyone has it. But we forget that the author and the original reader have their own baggage. And we throw that aside and we just put ours in it. We have to put their baggage in it first. And then we can move forward with how we understand it. So I want to give an example of this. I want to give an example of how sometimes we can read a part of the Bible and we can, on the surface, think we know what it means. But when we step back, we're like, well, how does this fit into no more tears, no more crying, no more death, God is all in all? How does that fit into the whole story? Because some of it doesn't seem like it does, right? A lot of it. When you're in the Old Testament, sometimes you're like, okay, God will be all in all. He'll be among the people and he'll wipe tears from their eyes. Why is he commanding some of the people to slaughter some of the other people and all their pets? Right? Like, it's very odd. And sometimes we don't understand why. And we're going to deal with a lot of those texts in this series. It's going to be really fun. We're not doing that today. But the point is, always ask yourself, how does this fit into the overall story? How does this pull us towards that renewal and that hope that we see in the book of Revelation? So I'm going to give a fun example. And this is one of my favorite odd texts in the Bible. It's very misunderstood, I would argue, by a lot of people. And rightfully so, because if you just read it out of its context, it seems very odd. So there's this, you probably will recognize it when I read it. But I want you for a moment to just imagine, right, that you never have heard it before. You don't know what comes before it, and you don't know what comes after it. And you don't know who wrote it, and you don't know to whom it was written. I just want you to listen to the words, the English words I'm going to read you. I want you to listen to them and just think about it as if you've never heard it before. A woman should learn in quietness and full submission. I do not permit a woman to teach or to assume authority over a man. She must be quiet. For Adam was formed first, then Eve. And Adam was not the one deceived. It was the woman who was deceived and became a sinner. But women will be saved through childbearing if they continue in faith, love, and holiness with propriety. All right. Just think about that, right? And you don't know who said that. What is going on in this text, right? What is happening here? If you just read it and you didn't know the background, you might think, somebody's got a problem with women here. Somebody's anti-woman. I guess the person who wrote this just, doesn't really want, women to lead or talk. It says do not assume authority, and it says be quiet. How can you read it any differently? But then, now we're going to start getting into the context, right? Then we say, well, okay, we know the Apostle Paul wrote this, or at the very least, someone who was so in tune with the Apostle Paul and such a disciple that the early church accepted it as Pauline in some way. We know that it's Pauline, so would Paul say something like this? And then we can't help but think of 1 Corinthians when Paul says, if a woman prays out loud or preaches without her head covered, it's shame. And we think, well, okay, let's not get into the head cover thing right now, but at least we see that Paul's allowing for preaching in public prayer, so why would he say to be completely quiet here? And so we're like, it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit. But then, after that, we ask, Paul also said somewhere else that husbands and wives must submit to one another, and that neither has say over their own body, but that the other has say over the other. So why would he say for just women to submit to men? And we know Paul can't have an ultimate problem with women because he called Junia outstanding among the apostles, an apostle extraordinaire, if you will. And we also know that Paul over and over again gave props to the 3 or 4 rich women who funded his ministry. And we also know that Paul talked about being imprisoned with fellow laborers in the gospel who were women. So I don't know if I can picture Paul in chains, and his friends right next to him in chains, and she's like, Paul, remember when Jesus said, that. Please keep silent. What do you have to tell me about Jesus? I'm a man. Like, is that what this is saying? Is this saying, like, sorry, Haley, who's not here today. Sorry, Rachel, who's not here today. I really wanted to use them as examples, and it's like, they're not here. But, like, what about women in our very own congregation who have been to seminary? I had a 3-hour lunch with Rachel the other day. If you haven't met her, you should. I think most of you have. But I have no problem admitting that academically and theologically, this woman is my superior. Like, she is I feel like I'm pretty well read, but she has read so much more and studied so much more. And is it like, no, you can't. You can maybe tell me that over lunch, but not up here. Like, is that what Paul's really getting at? Well, then we back out a little more, and we say, okay, so this was written to Ephesus. And then we look at the passage before it, and he has an instruction to men, and he says, men, pray out loud, lift holy hands. I want you to be more involved in the worship. Women, I don't want you to dress with gold and braided hair and fancy clothes, but to be able to learn in quiet submission. And we ask, why? Is there something going on in Ephesus maybe at the time? Is there something happening in their local context that would require Paul to say, men, speak up. Women, don't speak up. And then, as we study history, we realize that the new Roman woman movement was huge in Ephesus because of the cult of Artemis. Ephesus was the very central location for the worship of the goddess Artemis, also called Diana sometimes in the New Testament. And it became a hub for this movement where women said, look, we're mistreated in the Roman Empire, because they were. Women didn't have any say. They weren't official citizens. It was illegal for a woman who was married to have sex with another man. it was not illegal for a man to have sex with another woman unless that woman was married to another man, right? But if not, then it didn't matter. It was not illegal. The Roman Empire treated women as objects. They literally said that they were morally inferior, right? The word virtue, like that important thing in classical thought, virtue, only a man can be virtuous. And the few times that a woman was thought to be virtuous was when she acted like a man. So went to war, killed somebody, right? Acted traditionally masculine. This is what the context is in Rome. So this new Roman woman, and centered in Ephesus, arose and said, no. We should be ruling. We should be in charge. The men should be serving us. We should dominate. They shouldn't dominate. And this had taken root in the church at Ephesus to the point where they kind of Christianized it and they looked at Eve as like a Christian Artemis. Right? We know we can't worship Artemis. But we can look to Eve as like our mother, our strong, powerful woman figure. She was created as superior to Adam. It's into this context that Paul is forced to say, whoa. Remember, I said there's no male or female in Christ. I said that you're all one. I said that nobody gets to dominate another group. Eve? I mean, yeah, she's pretty cool, I guess, as a hero of faith, but remember, she was deceived too. She ate the fruit first, in fact. Nobody gets to dominate another person. One group doesn't get to dominate another group. Because you see, Ephesus is, that's an interesting word. The problems of Ephesus weren't the problems of Corinth. And the problems of Corinth weren't the problems of the church at Rome. And the church at Rome's problems aren't the problems of Waters Avenue. Every church has different problems. Every person has different problems. And the word, the message of this new place of hope that we're all headed, speaks to those different problems in different ways. So at Ephesus, women were trying to dominate men. And Paul says nobody gets to dominate anyone else. I'm going to go out on a limb here and just try to contextualize this for you. And I hope it's not a limb like on Looney Tunes. You know, like they'll get up on the limb and they'll cut it to like trick someone, but they end up being on the wrong side. They cut themselves off. I hope that's not that kind of limb I'm going out on here. But I feel that if Paul came in to our church, or dare I say, our denominational leaning, he might say, man, you guys are hearing from this Chris guy a lot. He's always running his mouth. And if it's not him, it's like one of three other dudes. And you've got some really gifted women. I do not permit a man to teach in the church. I do not permit a man to hold authority over a woman. And I want the women to lift their hands in prayer. I want the women to make some noise. Because the context of this shows us that the problem is universal, yes. But the way it plays itself out might not be. So what's the problem when we miss the context? Well, we have groups going around trying to use these verses to say that women can't lead in the church. We have groups using one or two passages to undermine huge explanations of how the crucifixion undermines identity and puts everyone on equal standing. We have passages of hope and beauty pulling us down into despair or shame or guilt or violence. When you mishandle the context, you can achieve the exact opposite goal of what these passages are working towards. So in this series, we're going to work hard. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to read and study and dig and think and ask questions so that we can pull everything out we need to from what we're going to be going over. And so that we can always be reminded that these stories are here for what? Our instruction, right? Our correction. Pulling us towards that new life found in Christ. That's what it's for. Not to confirm something we thought we knew. Not to make us feel better about ourselves when we're just using it to hurt other people. But to really pull us to that new, beautiful hope that we see in Revelation chapter 21. So I hope that you'll work with me, and I hope that you're excited about going through the Bible, because I'm really excited. And I hope that you'll come back even if you're not excited, because it'll get exciting. And it'll come alive. And we'll take passage after passage, story after story, and find things that hopefully none of us have heard before, or if we have, make it fresh and alive again. Let's pray. God, we are so thankful that we have this awesome set of writings that can shape us and form us and pull us into something that's new, even if it might be uncomfortable for us, and call us into a beautiful new heaven and new earth where everyone has what they need and we don't die and we don't cry and we don't suffer pain and loss, and there's no more chaos or destruction. So give us ears to hear, as some of the stories say. Give us eyes to see, hearts to listen, and hands and feet to work